Hi, this is Victor Morganti from Vive. You're looking at the Boston Conceptual Modelling tool. Today we're going to be talking about reference schemes on entity types. We have a model before us where a person has a first name, person has a last name. The combination of first name and last name is unique, and we can see on person in brackets here ID. Now that ID is the reference scheme of the entity type person. In general, entity types in ORM transpose to a table in a relational database when you convert an ORM model to a relational model. So I'll just flick over quickly to Microsoft Access and we'll see we have a table called person, and if we go to the design view of that table, we can see that a person entity in the person table has a person ID, a first name and a last name. If we go back to the ORM model and the entity type, we can expand the reference scheme and actually see that ID transposes to person ID, so a value type person ID, and the fact type reads person has person ID. The role constraints on the fact type represent here a one-to-one relationship between person ID and person, which is to say that each person is uniquely identified by person ID. The double bar on this internal uniqueness constraint says that this constraint represents the preferred reference scheme for person. And if we hide the reference scheme, it shows it more simply that a person is uniquely identified by its ID. So if we go back to our table, person table is uniquely identified by a person ID represented by the primary key on the table. If we wanted to, we could say that each person is uniquely identified by their first name and their last name. To do that, we need to change this external uniqueness constraint to be the preferred reference scheme identifier for the entity type. So let's just right click on that and go to properties. And in the properties, for that reference, that role constraint, its isPreferred identifier is set to false. Now if we set that to true, just by double clicking on it, we can see that now that role constraint, that external uniqueness constraint, has a double bar on it, which means it is now the representing the reference scheme for person. And we call this a compound reference scheme because ultimately it resolves to two or more fields within a table when the model is transposed to a relational table in a database. So let's have a look at the database and what that would mean. So if we changed the primary key of the table to first name and last name, so it's no longer uniquely identified by person ID, but rather first name and last name, that's effectively what we've done within our object role model. So if we go back to our object role model, person still has a person ID, but the uniqueness constraint, which is the preferred reference scheme for the person, is first name and last name. Now we can see this more easily if we have a look at some sample populations for the relevant fact types. I'll just open those up here. And here we can see that person has first name, Barack Obama has first name Barack. Person has last name, Barack Obama has last name Obama. And we can see that person Barack Obama has person ID 123. So the uniquely identifying information for person is the combination of first name and last name, Barack Obama, and the relevant facts have the unique identifier Barack Obama as the unique identifier for that person, Barack and Obama, with person ID 123. So we can, if we change it back now to person ID being the reference scheme by changing the preferred identifier in the properties. We can see now that person with ID 123 has first name Barack, and person with person ID 123 has last name Obama. And we can reverse that again if we want. So if we want the unique identifying information for person to be first name and last name, we set up a external uniqueness constraint between first name and last name for person, change the is preferred identifier property for the role constraint, and now the uniquely identifying information for person is first name and last name. So Barack Obama has first name Barack, Barack Obama has last name Obama, and if we have a look at the fact table for person has person ID, we can see Barack Obama has person ID 123. So just to recap, I'll change that back to a simple reference scheme. So when a person has a reference mode that represents the reference scheme for that entity type, that's called a simple reference scheme. And if we change that to an external uniqueness constraint to be the reference scheme, we call that a compound reference scheme. So simple reference scheme and compound reference scheme. Thank you very much for watching.